tell you one thing, any of them Martians come around here, I'm gonna kick their butts.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. This is part 11 in my proper full-on exploration of every episode of the original series of the Twilight Zone. So there's 156 episodes, and I'm taking them most of the time in batches of 6. So this is slightly different because I'm right at the end of season 2. So I'm actually doing 5 episodes, and that closes season 2. I've looked ahead, and actually by the end of season 3, I'll kind of make up for it because I'm going to end with an episode of this, a video of this, that will be 7 episodes. So it'll work out as 6 episodes most of the time. So yeah, this is 5 episodes and really interesting episodes. Some of the most famous episodes are in here, and it's a really interesting little batch. So the first one is a fantastic episode. It's one that I didn't remember, and I was so compelled when I was watching it, so gripped onto it. It was just amazing, really, really powerful, brilliant, unpredictable episode. And the ending is so brilliant. It's called The Silence, and it's written by Rod Serling. Okay, so the opening narration of The Silence starts like this. The note that this man is carrying across a club room is in the form of a proposed wager, but it's the kind of wager that comes without precedent. It stands alone in the annals of bet-making as the strangest game of chance ever offered by one man to another. In just a moment, we'll see the terms of the wager and what young Mr. Tennyson does about it. And in the process, we'll witness all parties spin a wheel of chance in a very bizarre casino called the Twilight Zone. And it's such a great episode. And it features a really, really good central performance from Liam Sullivan, who I didn't really know before, but he might be one of those people that I've seen about a little bit. But I didn't know Liam Sullivan necessarily before, but it's such a great performance as this character that has this sort of big scene at the beginning where he's talking to all these guys in this gentleman's club. He's kind of holding court with 5 or 6 people, going on about how brilliant he is and all these different deals he's done, and basically showing off and talking the talk. And it cuts to this old man that's in there, and he's like really irritated by him. And he keeps saying he hates his voice. He hates everything about him. He hates how phony he is. He's a fraud. He keeps borrowing money, and he's just full of crap. And he hates it. And basically, he's saying that, and then it cuts to another scene where he declares that he needs everybody's attention in this gentleman's club, and he's going to offer a wager to this character. And the wager is that this man has to stay absolutely silent and not say a word for a year. And if he does that, then this old man will give him $500,000 as a reward for being silent for an entire year. And the guy's like, why do you want to do that? And he's like, because I hate your voice. And I just want to hear you being silent for an entire year. And it plays out in a fantastic way. So that he can prove that he's completely silent, he has to stay in this gentleman's club, and they build a special room for him, which has got see-through walls, so you can't, you can see everything that's happening inside. So if he does speak, it will be obvious. And there's cameras filming him all the time. And basically, he's all set up to do that. And he's got to be in that room for a year. So he can't see his wife. He gets given food by this butler character. And basically, this wager is played out through the episode. And at one point, the old man that gives him the wager is getting really worried that he's going to complete it. And he's trying to goad him out by going on about, his wife's been seen with this guy with a sports car, and he's been really, really nasty. It's so good the way that this, if you like, a battle of wits is happening in this episode. And I'm not going to tell you how it ends, because the ending is one of the best endings I've ever seen of anything in my life. It's such a fantastic ending. And it ranks up there. I don't know if you know this reference, but it ranks up there with the ending of Quitter's Inc. by Stephen King. It's such a brilliant ending. So definitely one of the best endings in the Twilight Zone, but it's a fantastic story. And it's really good example of what the Twilight Zone can do with a short story format. So that's The Silence. The next episode in this little batch is Shadow Play. And Shadow Play begins with this opening narration. Adam Grant, a nondescript kind of man found guilty of murder and sentenced to the electric chair. Like every other criminal caught in the wheels of justice, he's scared right down to the marrow of his bones. But it isn't prison that scares him. The long, silent nights of waiting, the slow walk to the little room, or even death itself. It's something else that holds Adam Grant in the hot, sweaty grip of fear. Something worse than any punishment this world has to offer. Something found only in the Twilight Zone. So Shadow Play is written by Charles Beaumont, and this is a big performance, mostly by one man, by Dennis Weaver. So Dennis Weaver has another Twilight Zone connection. I mean, he's been in previous episodes anyway, but also, what a nice little connection with the Twilight Zone is that Dennis Weaver was the main character, and again, a big kind of one-character performance, if you like, for most of the film, as the guy being chased by a huge lorry in Duel, which was Steven Spielberg's first ever film, written by Richard Matheson. So that's the link there with the Twilight Zone, that film was written by Richard Matheson, but it was Spielberg's first film. So Dennis Weaver was in that. So this is a big performance from Dennis Weaver, and basically it's another moment where Charles Beaumont plays with dreams, because this is a man who starts off in the episode being sentenced to death for a murder crime, and he freaks out in the court, shouting about the fact that it's going to happen again, it's going to happen again, it's going to happen again. And basically the way this episode plays out, he's trapped in a loop, and it's kind of like really dark and really, I mean, Charles Beaumont's imagination is quite dark. A lot of these episodes are quite dark, and yeah, it's quite a horrific thing to be locked into this loop of constantly being tried and executed, because that's essentially one of the elements of this loop, that he gets executed for the crime. And yeah, it's a really strong episode, really good, and it's quite an unusual and complete thing where it's just like that's what's happening, play it out. And there's a nice, very quick performance from Bernie Hamilton as well, so that was quite nice seeing him. He's playing the harmonica in the prison at the beginning, and Bernie Hamilton ends up being really famous as the captain in Starsky and Hutch. Captain Doby, I think is his name. I haven't looked it up. I think it's Captain Doby. But yeah, I love Starsky and Hutch, and he was brilliant as the captain. And the amount of times he had to roll his eyes and say, "Can you guys not do that again?" But we love Starsky and Hutch, don't we? So yeah, Bernie Hamilton was the captain in Starsky and Hutch. So yeah, that was really cool seeing him there, really for a very brief moment in the beginning of the episode. So yeah, Shadow Play is a really good episode and a great performance from Dennis Weaver. So the third episode is The Mind and the Matter. And The Mind and the Matter begins with this opening narration. A brief, if frenetic, introduction to Mr. Archibald Beechcroft, a child of the 20th century, a product of the population explosion, and one of the inheritors of the legacy of progress. Mr. Beechcroft again, this time Act 2 of his daily routine and battle for survival. And in just a moment, our hero will begin his personal one-man rebellion against the mechanics of his age. And to do so, he will enlist certain aids only available in the Twilight Zone. So The Mind and the Matter is written by Rod Serling, and it's one that I really, really vividly remember from when I watched it as a child and first got into it. And I think it's because of the image at the end. But this character, Mr. Beechcroft, hates people. It's probably another, in general, I think it's quite memorable, the idea of this character, this obnoxious character who hates people. He hates having anyone around him. He hates the people he works with. He hates the crowds. He hates the sort of commuting aspect of when he's getting the train in the morning. There's millions of people around. He hates all that. He just hates people. And he gets given this book. He gets lent this book about how concentration can create any kind of possibility that you can do anything if you concentrate hard enough. And it sort of plays with that idea, and he concentrates and makes people disappear. Yeah, because he hates people, that's what he wants to do. And it's nice because it plays with the idea of, yeah, okay, once you've done that, how far are you going to go? And he gets quite bored with the fact that he's literally made everybody disappear. And he creates an earthquake at one point, and he's like, oh, actually, I don't want to do that, really. And he's just sort of bored, basically, and playing with the idea of what he can do with these powers that come from concentration. And it's got a bit of a sort of lesson learned kind of message in the plot that works really well. But yeah, it's a strong performance from the guy playing Mr. Beechcroft. I forgot to look him up. And basically, it's a story about unpredictability. You know, the fact that life should be unpredictable. That's what we love about life. You know, if it's all very samey, we'll get bored very quickly. And variety, you know, we want variety in our lives. So like that is such an essential part of our lives. And community, you know, society, being social, that's a huge part of our lives. And we would get lonely very quickly and we'd hate it. And that's another kind of message in the story. So that's really good. And then the ending is just really funny ending. There is some really unconvincing special effects in this episode. And I always, my take is always to give the show and the film or whatever the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, if you're happy to do that, it's a cool ending as well. So yeah, The Mind and the Matter was one I really, really vividly remember from decades ago. And it was really fun watching it again. And I liked it. I thought it was really good. Another Rod Serling one. Okay, so the next one is really famous. It's one of those stories that gets mentioned a lot when people talk about the Twilight Zone. And it's right at the end of season 2, which is interesting because, you know, the show is in its flow. And there's a lot of characters that have been played by actors who have been in previous shows as well. It's almost becoming a bit of a repertory company that he's bringing these actors back a lot. And a lot of actors are racking up 2, 3, 4 episodes. And it's quite interesting. And also these actors do become famous for other things as well, which I'll get onto in a second. So anyway, the episode is the very famous Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? And this episode begins with this opening narration. Wintry February night, the present. Order of events. A phone call from a frightened woman notating the arrival of an unidentified flying object, and the checkout you've just witnessed with 2 state troopers verifying the event. But with nothing more enlightening to add beyond evidence of some tracks leading across a highway to a diner. You've heard of trying to find a needle in a haystack? Well, stay with us now, and you'll be part of an investigating team whose mission is not to find that proverbial needle. No, their task is even harder. They've got to find a Martian in a diner, and in just a moment you'll search for them, because you've just landed in the Twilight Zone. So this episode has a lovely advert at the end of the previous episode, where Rod Serling says, "This next episode is for any space buffs or jigsaw addicts." So he says that because he loves this idea that it's about finding the Martian in this room, kind of spot it's like a whodunit, if you like. Who is it? Sort of, rather than whodunit. Who is it? And he keeps referring to in the introduction and in the previous advert about finding a needle in a haystack, but it's finding a Martian in a diner. So 2 state troopers start the episode by discovering that a UFO has landed, and because of the roads closing and really bad weather conditions, and the bridge is closed as well, that's an uncrossable bridge, they find this diner. They know that this Martian is in this diner. There's one too many people from a bus that had offloaded onto the diner. They know that the Martian is in there, so they need to find out which one it is. And it's really cool the way that the dialogue bounces between the characters in there. They're all very significantly different characters, very distinctive characters. And as I said, the characters are played by actors who either have a history with Twilight Zone or do become famous for other things. So, for example, John Hoyt, who's like one of the ones with one of the most amounts of dialogue, John Hoyt was in The Lateness of the Hour, playing the father in that one, and a really strong performance in that. Very powerful performance, and pretty much the centre of the episode in lots of ways. And in this one, he's got quite a lot to do as well, and he's got real presence. So yeah, he's a really interesting actor. Jack Elam is a really interesting actor because I recognised his face before, and I thought I definitely know that guy from somewhere. And I looked him up, and he's done tons and tons of stuff, but he's got a very distinctive look. He's done tons and tons of stuff, but the thing that I remembered him from when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, it's him. was that he's the Mad Doctor in the Cannonball Run films that Burt does with Burt Reynolds. And it's like a mad scientist kind of character. Looks like really rough. And he's got that kind of look. And he's billed in the episode as the crazy man. And he's really good in the episode. And he's loving it. He's jumping up and down going, this is great. This is great. Which one's the Martian? And he's just really enjoyed it. So Jack Elam is a really interesting actor from that point of view. And Bill Irwin is another interesting one that's in this episode. He's a very successful actor, but he was also a cartoonist, which I love. So he had a dual career. So he was an actor and he was a cartoonist. And recently, he had a lot of fame as a recurring character on Seinfeld. So he played an old guy in Seinfeld. He's done tons and tons of stuff. But I love the fact that this guy is a cartoonist as well. I think that's really interesting. And then you've got Barney Phillips as well in this episode, who made a big impression in a previous episode of The Twilight Zone as well. And he has actually been in 4 episodes of The Twilight Zone. So Barney Phillips is a really great actor for The Twilight Zone and had a big connection with it. So they're looking for this Martian in this diner. And at one point, the crazy man mentions Ray Bradbury and Martians connecting to Ray Bradbury, which is great. So I love that. So it's nice that Ray Bradbury was mentioned, because Ray Bradbury has got a definite influence on Rod Serling and on The Twilight Zone, and they had asked him to write for The Twilight Zone as well. And he does actually, there is an episode later on in the series that's written by Ray Bradbury, but there are issues with Ray Bradbury, which I will come to when I get to his episode. But that's a really lovely little moment. You go, oh my God, they mentioned Ray Bradbury, that's awesome. And I really love the ordinary nature of this search for the UFO, the search for the Martian, trying to figure out which one of the people in the diner is the Martian. I love how ordinary it is. Nobody thinks it's weird. Nobody thinks, what UFO? What alien? It just cracks on as if that's a normal thing. And I love that. It's like a conceit within the episode that I think works really, really well. And there's a really famous bit in the episode which, if I showed you an image of it, it would spoil who the person is that's the Martian. Hopefully you haven't had it spoiled by how famous the episode is. But there's a lovely little 3-arm trick that's in the episode that's really cool. And the last conversation, like the epilogue, if you like, of the episode, the last conversation between 2 characters is absolutely brilliant. And it's a really nice ending and quite funny. Not laugh out loud funny, but in a kind of a wry, kind of amusing, smiley kind of funny. So yeah, an absolutely classic episode for all the right reasons. Brilliant stuff. And it doesn't disappoint. The beginning, the middle, and the end are all brilliant. So, will a real Martian please stand up? Fantastic. Okay, so the last one in this little batch is an amazing way to finish season 2, and that's The Obsolete Man. And The Obsolete Man begins with this opening narration. You walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world, it's simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who's ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace. This is Mr. Romney Wordsworth in his last 48 hours on Earth. He's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated, because he's built out of flesh and because he has a mind. Mr. Romney Wordsworth, who will draw his last breaths in the Twilight Zone. So The Obsolete Man is an episode written by Rod Serling, as are most of these, as you can see. And it starts off very immediately with a very striking stage design. And I will say this whole episode feels very theatrical. It could be a theatrical play, the way it runs. So I do think that's an interesting aspect of the episode. It could easily be like you're just sitting in a theatre watching a play. And a lot of it is a 2-person battle of words. But this is one of Rod Serling's big rants, if you like, against totalitarianism. So Hitler and Stalin are mentioned in the dialogue. by the Chancellor. The Chancellor's played by Fritz Weaver, who's been in previous episodes and has had a very long, distinguished career. And we have another appearance by Burgess Meredith. So Burgess Meredith plays Wordsworth, who's a librarian, and he's basically under trial for being obsolete in this totalitarian state. And the Chancellor is leading this trial to prove that he's obsolete. And if he's obsolete, he will be sentenced to death, and he gets to choose how he dies, but it has to be within the 48 hours after he's sentenced. And that's just great the way it plays out. And you don't know how it's going to end. There's a really big section of the episode which is Burgess Meredith's character and Fritz Weaver's character just kind of talking about rights and about history and about freedom and about the power of the state, how much the state should have. It is also a bit of a play on power, because at one point power shifts in the episode, and that's really good when it happens. And it's just a really interesting political statement from Rod Serling, and a really important one. And I don't normally do this, but for this one, I'm going to read out the closing narration as well as the opening narration. The Chancellor, the late Chancellor, was only partly correct. He was obsolete, but so was the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, and the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for mankind in the Twilight Zone. So yeah, basically the episode is all hinges on this idea of power and freedom. And one of the lines that I really liked was when Burgess Meredith is there talking about his impending death and the fact that death is an equalizer. And he refers to him and Fritz Weaver's character saying, there's very little to distinguish us in the eyes of death. And I think that's a brilliant line. But yeah, it's a fantastic episode. It's a great little run, these 5 episodes, and a great way to finish season 2. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is part 11 of the Twilight Zone exploration. I'll be back with season 3. Stay curious, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Picture of what it's like to